Right now, in this very moment, there are men walking down aisles, slipping rings onto their fingers, saying "I do," with genuine smiles on their faces. They believe they're choosing love. They think they're making the ultimate romantic gesture. What they don't realize is they just signed their philosophical death warrant. Not their physical death, something far worse. The death of their potential to become who they were truly meant to be. And the man who predicted this tragedy 150 years ago was Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who declared God is dead and warned us about the most seductive trap ever designed by society. He saw marriage not as a celebration of love, but as civilization's masterpiece of domestication. A beautifully disguised prison that transforms dangerous creators into harmless consumers. A system so perfectly engineered that its victims defend it, promote it, and call their captivity freedom. You're about to discover 7 brutal truths about marriage that Nietzsche tried to warn you about. Truths so uncomfortable that society has spent generations burying them under romantic fantasies and fairy tale endings. But here's what makes this different from every other relationship advice video you've ever seen. This isn't about finding the right person or making marriage work better. This is about understanding how marriage as an institution fundamentally transforms who you are at the deepest level. And once you see what I'm about to show you, you'll never look at another wedding the same way again. Picture a wild stallion running free across endless plains, powerful, untamed, following nothing but its own instincts. Now picture that same stallion in a stable, well-fed, well-groomed, perfectly safe, but broken. The spirit that once drove it to explore horizons now redirected to walking in circles. That transformation from wild to domesticated, from dangerous to manageable, from free to owned, that's what Nietzsche saw happening to men through marriage. And he had very specific warnings about how this process works. The first brutal truth is that marriage kills what Nietzsche called your will to power. Now most people misunderstand this concept. They think will to power means dominating others, being aggressive, acting tough. But Nietzsche meant something far more profound. Will to power is your drive to become who you truly are, to create your own values, to overcome your limitations, to achieve your highest potential. It's the force that pushes artists to create masterpieces, entrepreneurs to build empires, philosophers to discover new truths. It's what makes you dangerous to the status quo because you refuse to accept the world as it is. But marriage systematically destroys this drive. How? Through a process so subtle, so gradual, that you won't even notice it's happening. Your energy, which once flowed toward creation and self-overcoming, gets redirected toward maintenance and obligation. Instead of asking, "What could I become?" you start asking, "What does my spouse need?" Instead of pursuing your authentic vision, you start negotiating compromises. Your will to power gets transformed into will to provide, will to please, will to maintain harmony. Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "Many short follies, that is what you call love, and your marriage puts an end to many short follies with one long stupidity." One long stupidity. Think about the men you know who got married with big dreams. The entrepreneur who was going to change the world but now focuses on steady income for the family. The artist who was creating revolutionary work but now makes safe choices because he has responsibilities. The adventurer who was exploring the edges of human experience but now plans family vacations to Disney World. Watch what happens to creative energy under the weight of domestic obligation. The novelist stops writing the risky, boundary-pushing stories that made him feel alive and starts crafting safe commercial fiction that pays the bills. The musician abandons experimental sounds for radio-friendly formulas that support the mortgage. The inventor shelves revolutionary ideas for incremental improvements that guarantee steady contracts. This isn't about whether these men are happy. Nietzsche wasn't primarily concerned with happiness. He was concerned with greatness. He understood that comfort and greatness are often opposites. The comfortable man doesn't create, doesn't risk, doesn't push boundaries. And marriage, more than any other institution, is designed to make you comfortable. It provides security at the expense of uncertainty, stability at the cost of growth, predictability in place of possibility. The married man learns to measure success not by what he creates, but by what he maintains. Not by how he transforms the world, but by how well he preserves his corner of it. The second brutal truth is what Nietzsche called herd morality, and how marriage serves as its most powerful enforcement mechanism. Nietzsche observed that most people live according to what he called slave morality, accepting values created by others instead of creating their own. Society needs you to be predictable, manageable, controllable, and marriage is the perfect tool for this control, because it makes you complicit in your own domestication. Think about what happens when a rebellious, creative, unpredictable man gets married. Suddenly he has a mortgage, car payments, insurance premiums. He can't just quit his job to pursue a crazy idea because other people depend on him. He can't take risks because failure would affect more than just himself. He can't be selfish with his time, energy, or resources because he has obligations. The very responsibilities that make him feel like a good man are the same responsibilities that prevent him from becoming a great man. Nietzsche wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. Marriage is how the tribe overwhelms you, not through force but through love. You voluntarily surrender your independence because it feels noble, mature, responsible. But what you're really surrendering is your capacity to create new values, to challenge existing systems, to become something unprecedented. Consider this transformation more deeply. The single man faces only his own consequences for his choices. He can experiment with radical ideas, pursue unconventional paths, fail spectacularly, and rebuild from nothing. His mistakes are his own to make and learn from. But the married man must filter every decision through multiple considerations. How will this affect my spouse's security? What if I fail and can't provide for my family? How will my risks impact people who didn't choose to take them? This isn't inherently wrong, but it fundamentally changes the nature of choice itself. The single man chooses from possibility, the married man from responsibility. The single man can say yes to opportunity, the married man must say maybe. Let me discuss this first. The single man can pivot quickly when circumstances change. The married man must negotiate change through committees of concerned parties. Consider this. Name one married man you know who's more dangerous, more unpredictable, more creatively powerful today than he was when he was single. The transformation is so complete, so universal, that we barely notice it anymore. We just call it growing up. But Nietzsche would ask, is it growing up or giving up? The third brutal truth involves what Nietzsche learned from his philosophical mentor, Arthur Schopenhauer, about the biological trap underlying romantic love. Schopenhauer wrote, "All love is rooted in the sexual impulse alone. Nay, it absolutely is only a more definitely determined, specialized, and perhaps, strictly speaking, more individualized sexual impulse." This might sound cynical, but Schopenhauer and Nietzsche understood something that modern society desperately wants to ignore. What we call romantic love is often just biology manipulating us into reproducing. Your genes don't care about your individual happiness, your creative potential, or your philosophical development. They care about continuation of the species, and they'll flood your brain with chemicals that make marriage feel like your idea, like your choice, like your deepest desire. Schopenhauer observed, marrying means to have one's rights and double one's duties. But the biological programming is so strong that this obvious mathematical disadvantage feels like gain, not loss. You experience the restriction of your freedom as expansion of your purpose, the limitation of your possibilities as enrichment of your meaning, the reduction of your autonomy as deepening of your connection. Think about how this manipulation works in practice. You meet someone who triggers your biological programming. Your brain floods with dopamine, oxytocin, and other chemicals that create the sensation of euphoria, connection, and inevitability. This feeling is so powerful that you interpret it as destiny, as finding your soulmate, as discovering your purpose. But what's really happening is your DNA executing a program designed to ensure genetic continuation. Nietzsche saw through this biological manipulation. He understood that the same drive that creates great art, builds empires, and discovers truths is being redirected toward domestic concerns. The passion that could fuel world-changing innovation gets channeled into planning anniversary dinners. The intensity that could produce philosophical breakthroughs gets absorbed by relationship maintenance. The obsessive focus that could revolutionize industries gets directed toward remembering to pick up groceries and coordinating social calendars. This redirection isn't conscious or malicious. It happens naturally as your brain's reward systems get hijacked by romantic attachment. The same neural pathways that once fired when you made creative breakthroughs now fire when you make your partner happy. The same psychological rewards that once came from pushing your own boundaries now come from maintaining relationship harmony. Your brain literally rewires itself to find meaning in compromise rather than creation, in stability rather than growth. This is why Nietzsche remained unmarried, why Tesla chose celibacy, why so many great creators lived solitary lives. Not because they hated women or feared intimacy, but because they recognized that their biological programming was working against their highest aspirations. They understood that romantic love, however beautiful, is ultimately a distraction from the work of becoming who you're meant to be. The fourth brutal truth is about what Nietzsche called eternal recurrence, and how it reveals the true nature of most marriages. Nietzsche proposed this as the ultimate test of authenticity. If you had to live your exact life forever, repeating every moment infinitely, would you choose it? Would you say yes to every decision, every compromise, every sacrifice? This isn't just a thought experiment. It's a diagnostic tool for measuring the authenticity of your choices. When you truly love your life, when your decisions flow from your deepest values, the idea of repeating it forever feels like a gift. When you're living according to others' expectations, when you're making choices from fear rather than love, eternal recurrence feels like hell. Most married men fail this test spectacularly. They're living lives they wouldn't choose if they had to repeat them forever. They've made compromises they regret, accepted limitations they resent, surrendered dreams they still think about, but they rationalize these choices as maturity, responsibility, love. They tell themselves that sacrifice is noble, that giving up personal dreams for family obligations is what good men do. But Nietzsche would ask, is it really love if it requires you to become less than who you are? Is it really maturity if it means abandoning your growth? Is it really responsibility if it prevents you from taking responsibility for your own authentic development? Consider the married man who gave up his dream of writing the great American novel to focus on providing for his family. He tells himself this was the right choice, the mature choice, the loving choice. But late at night, when he's lying awake next to his sleeping spouse, does he feel grateful for this choice? Or does he feel a quiet resentment, a sense of what might have been, a wondering about the book that will never exist? The eternal recurrence test cuts through all the rationalization and asks the hard question. If you had to make this choice again and again for eternity, would you? If you had to abandon your dreams infinitely, sacrifice your potential repeatedly, choose security over authenticity forever, would you still call it love? Nietzsche wrote, "What does not destroy me makes me stronger." But he also understood that some things don't destroy you quickly. They weaken you slowly, so gradually that you don't notice until your strength is gone. Marriage often works this way. It doesn't kill your dreams in one dramatic moment. It erodes them through 1,000 small compromises, 1,000,000 tiny surrenders. The man who passes Nietzsche's eternal recurrence test looks at his life and says yes to every part of it, including the struggles, the risks, the uncertainty. But the typical married man looks at his life and makes excuses. He explains why he had to give up this opportunity, why he couldn't pursue that dream, why he had to choose security over authenticity. This isn't about whether these choices were wrong. This is about whether they were truly chosen or simply accepted as inevitable. Nietzsche believed that greatness comes from embracing your fate completely, but you can only embrace what you've actually chosen, not what you've passively accepted. The fifth brutal truth involves what Nietzsche called the death of God, and how it relates to modern marriage. When Nietzsche declared God is dead, he wasn't celebrating. He was warning about the collapse of traditional meaning structures and the responsibility this places on individuals to create their own values. In previous generations, people married because they had to. Social pressure, economic necessity, religious obligation, lack of alternatives. The choice was made for them by forces larger than themselves. A woman couldn't support herself financially. A man couldn't access domestic comforts without a wife. Society ostracized those who remained single. Religion condemned those who lived together without marriage. The institution was mandatory, not optional. But you're living in the first generation that can truly choose. Marriage has become optional rather than mandatory. Women can support themselves. Men can hire housekeepers and order takeout. Society accepts single people. Religion has less influence over personal choices. And this terrifies society because it means the traditional control mechanisms no longer work automatically. The death of God in relationships doesn't mean the death of love. It means the birth of conscious choice. When marriage becomes truly optional, when men can thrive without wives, when traditional gender roles become negotiable rather than inevitable, everything changes. The social order has to reorganize around completely new assumptions. But here's what most men don't realize. This freedom to choose is also the burden to choose. Nietzsche understood that most people find freedom terrifying. They prefer to follow scripts written by others rather than write their own. And marriage provides the perfect script, complete with social approval, legal framework, and cultural celebration. When your grandfather got married, he was following a clear path laid out by generations before him. The choice was obvious because it wasn't really a choice. But when you consider marriage today, you're making a decision that has no historical precedent. You're choosing to limit your freedom when limitation isn't necessary. You're accepting responsibilities you don't have to accept. This makes every modern marriage a philosophical statement. You're declaring that you prefer interdependence to independence, that you value connection over autonomy, that you choose love over freedom. But are you making this declaration consciously? Or are you simply following an outdated script because it's easier than writing your own? The man who chooses marriage in the age of choice is making a fundamentally different decision than his grandfather, who had no real alternatives. But is he choosing from strength or from weakness? From authentic desire or from cultural programming? From individual will or from herd instinct? The sixth brutal truth is about what Nietzsche called slave morality versus master morality, and how marriage reinforces the wrong one. This is perhaps his most misunderstood concept, so let me be clear about what these terms actually mean. Slave morality is reactive, defining itself in opposition to others. It values sacrifice, selflessness, duty, obligation. It measures goodness by how much you give up for others, how much you suffer for the right cause, how much you subordinate your will to higher authorities. Master morality is creative, defining itself from its own values. It prioritizes self-development, authenticity, creative expression, individual excellence. It measures greatness by what you create, what you overcome, what you become. Neither is inherently good or bad, but they represent fundamentally different approaches to life. And marriage, as commonly practiced, is built entirely on slave morality. The good husband is the one who sacrifices for his family. The good father is the one who puts his children's needs before his own dreams. The good provider is the one who works at jobs he hates to pay for things he doesn't want. Listen to how people describe successful marriages. He gave up everything for her. She sacrifices so much for the family. They both put the relationship before their individual needs. These are all slave morality values. The assumption is that love requires self-negation, that commitment means surrendering personal will to collective good. But what if that's backwards? What if the strongest relationships come from two people who have developed master morality, who have become so fully themselves that they can choose partnership from abundance rather than neediness? What if love works better when both people are complete individuals rather than half people seeking completion? Master morality doesn't reject love, family, or commitment, but it insists that these choices come from individual will rather than social pressure. The master creates his own definition of what marriage should be rather than accepting society's definition. He chooses partnership from strength rather than from neediness, from abundance rather than from scarcity, from authenticity rather than from obligation. But most men never develop master morality. They remain trapped in slave morality their entire lives, measuring their worth by how well they conform to external standards, rather than how authentically they express their individual nature. They become good husbands, good fathers, good providers, but they never become themselves. The seventh and final brutal truth is what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are, and why marriage, as commonly practiced, prevents this becoming. This is the heart of Nietzsche's entire philosophy. Humans are not fixed entities but processes of becoming. You're not trying to find yourself, you're trying to create yourself. But this process of self-creation requires what Nietzsche called solitude. Not loneliness, not isolation, but the psychological space necessary for deep self-reflection and authentic choice. Marriage fills this space with obligations, negotiations, compromises, and considerations of others. Think about the last time you made a major life decision based purely on your own authentic desires, without considering how it would affect your spouse, your children, your family's financial situation, your social reputation. If you're married, it's probably been years, maybe decades. Your decision-making process has become so thoroughly colonized by other people's needs that you've lost touch with your own. Nietzsche wrote, "You must have chaos within yourself to give birth to a dancing star." But marriage is fundamentally anti-chaos. It's about stability, predictability, harmony, beautiful things, but not the soil where dancing stars are born. The dancing star emerges from the man who embraces the chaos of authentic self-creation, who can face the void without needing someone to hold his hand, who creates meaning from nothing and purpose from possibility. Now, I'm not telling you whether to get married or not. That's not the point. The point is understanding what you're choosing and why. Are you choosing marriage from what Nietzsche called free spirit, authentic individual will, or from what he called herd instinct, social programming, and biological manipulation? Are you marrying because you found someone who enhances your journey of becoming, or because you're afraid of the journey itself? Are you choosing partnership from strength, or seeking rescue from freedom? Nietzsche's warnings about marriage weren't about marriage itself. They were about unconscious choice, about living according to others' values rather than your own, about surrendering your will to power to social conformity. The question isn't whether marriage is good or bad. The question is whether you're strong enough to choose it consciously, whether you're free enough to create your own version of it, whether you're authentic enough to make it serve your becoming rather than prevent it. If this video challenged you, if it made you question assumptions you've never questioned, if it revealed aspects of your choices you hadn't considered, then Nietzsche would be satisfied, not because he wanted to destroy your relationships, but because he wanted to ensure your choices are truly yours. The most dangerous thing you can do is live someone else's life while calling it your own. And the most powerful thing you can do is create your own values, make your own choices, and become who you truly are, regardless of what society expects.